December 16th, 1970. Dagmar Alexander, originally from Germany, has just been murdered in her apartment in Santa Cruz de Tenerife, Spain. Her 16-year-old son, Frank, is now claiming the lives of two of his sisters. Meanwhile, Harald Alexander, the patriarch of the family, simply plays the harmonium. Welcome to Make It Quick, a short-form podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Baquez. Thanks for tuning in. Frank Alexander killed 3 of his family members that day, an event later dubbed as the crime of the century by the press. Not one of Frank's victims tried to defend themselves. Why? And why was Harald playing the harmonium during this tragedy? To understand what happened, we need to go back to Germany. Back to when Harald Alexander joined the Lorber Society. The Lorber Society was a Gnostic Christian group named after Jacob Lorber, a professor from Austria. In 1840, Lorber claimed he began hearing an inner voice, a voice that spoke freely, in first person. According to Lorber, it was the voice of Jesus Christ. Their communication was so efficient and frequent that Lorber wrote over 10,000 pages following the voice's commands. Lorber believed that the universe was created by God as the environment for a society of living love. He also believed in spiritual rebirth. After his death, Lorber's revelations were passed on, eventually reaching a man named George Rila, which brings us back to Harald Alexander. Rila and Alexander met in Hamburg, Germany, back in the 1930s, and at the time, Rila was the leader of the Lorber Society. Soon after, Harald and his wife Dagmar joined the group. The two quickly became good friends. In fact, Alexander's believed to have nursed Rila during his last days of life, and, after his passing, it was Alexander who became the new leader of the Lorber Society. Lorber's teachings had had a big impact on Alexander. He now considered himself to be the chosen one, but it would be his son, Frank, who would one day be the Messiah. Frank was born in 1954. He had an older sister, Maureen, and would later be a brother to 2 twin girls, Petra and Sabine. But, as you can imagine, there was nothing ordinary about the Alexander family. Frank was the only son, but he was also a prophet, the Messiah. So, thanks to his father's blessing, his power over his sisters, and even his mother, grew. His behavior was never questioned. He was free to do whatever he wanted, and that's when things started to get twisted. Frank was banned from sleeping with other women once he reached sexual maturity, because they were deemed, quote, dirty, unquote. So, his only option was, you guessed it, incest. His father allowed Frank to sleep not only with his sisters, but with his own mother too. After all, Lorber's writings did claim that women were inferior to men. If Eve was really created from Adam's rib, then she was simply a copy, an imitation. Word about the Alexander family quickly spread around their neighborhood. So much so that police opened an investigation. But the Alexanders were quick. They packed their bags and left Germany for Santa Cruz de Tenerife, Spain. Here is where this story truly begins. Santa Cruz de Tenerife, commonly known as just Tenerife, is a province in the Canary Islands, a Spanish autonomous community off the coast of Africa, just south of Morocco. Back in 1970, Spain was under Francisco Franco's dictatorship. Franco had seized power in 1939 after the Spanish Civil War, and was now finally opening up Spain to the rest of the world, a rebranding campaign, if you will, to present the country as a democracy. The country was changing, but the Alexanders were not. They moved into an apartment on 37 Jesus of Nazareth Street in Tenerife, a street name that the family thought to be a good omen. The Alexander sisters began working in different households, while Frank became a delivery man. But it wasn't long before neighbors began hearing strange noises. Just like in Germany, rumors around the incestuous family began to grow. An incestuous family, ties to a Gnostic Christian group known as the Lorber Society, a 16-year-old boy labeled as the Messiah, a series of oddities that culminated on December 16th, 1970. It's the early afternoon. Harald and Dagmar are napping. Frank walks into his parents' room. It is at this moment that he claims that the look on his mother's face changed. Suddenly, she had a devilish look, cold as ice, along with a sarcastic smirk. That was the beginning of the end of Dagmar Alexander. Frank not only started beating his mother, but asked his father for help too, and Harald obeyed. Even more surprisingly, Dagmar allegedly turned and laid on her stomach so they could, quote, be over with it, unquote. Once they were done with Dagmar, Frank went into his sister's room, and it was then that Harald began playing the harmonium, playing music linked to their Lorber Society rituals. But they weren't done just yet. After murdering Dagmar, Marine, and Petra, they began to mutilate their bodies. Removing body parts, hanging them from walls, covering the whole apartment in blood. The details, for those interested, can be found online. But now it's time for both Frank and Harald to escape. They intended to leave for Germany, but there was an issue. They had destroyed their passports during their killing frenzy. Not only that, but someone was missing. Frank had murdered his mother and two of his sisters with Harald's help, but one of the twin girls was not there. Where was Sabine? After showering and changing clothes, father and son left the apartment. They had 25,000 pesetas on them, the Spanish currency at the time. It was the equivalent of about $170. While it may not seem like a lot, it was a considerable sum of money at the time. The two would spend the night in Adeje, a touristic area in the south of Tenerife, and next morning they'd set off to find Sabine. Sabine Alexander was 15 at the time. She had spent the previous day and night at Dr. Trenkler's home, where she worked as a domestic servant. It was here that Frank and Harald found her. Father and son told Sabine all of what had happened. Unfortunately for them, Dr. Trenkler overheard everything and quickly called the police. Father and son were arrested. And soon, they would face trial. The defense asked for Harald and Frank to be sent to a psychiatric hospital, but the prosecutor had other plans. They wanted the death penalty, which was still legal at the time. During trial, neither father nor son spoke. Harald seemed absent, while Frank seemed out of it. Two forensic experts would later diagnose Harald with a mental disease comparable to schizophrenia. Frank and Harald were sent to a psychiatric hospital. The jury recognized they committed the crime, but they thought they could not be found guilty by reason of insanity. They would also have to pay Sabine, the only survivor, 900,000 pesetas, or about $6,000. The story should end here. Frank and Alexander should have lived out their days in that hospital, which was located in Madrid. But in 1990, they successfully escaped. Where to? No one knows. No one ever found them. One theory suggests they made it back to Germany, where they were welcomed by the Lorber Society. If they were alive today, Harald would be in his mid-90s, and Frank would be in his early 70s. Frank and Harald vanished off the face of the earth, but so did Sabine. No one knows about her whereabouts either. Some say she became a cloistered nun. While we don't know where they ended up, what we do know is that the Alexander family murders were the first ever homicides to be linked to a cult in Spain. Make It Quick is a short-form podcast hosted and produced by me, Daniel Vickers. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.